It's Wednesday, and it is time for another Business Analysis Live. I'm Susan Moore. I'm the Community Engagement Manager at the International Institute of Business Analysis. Hey, we're going to talk about today the power of observation, and I've got a guest. Steve Jones, who is not just a practitioner, he also has a podcast. You can see it up there kind of in the corner, Analysts After Dark. Steve, I don't want to mess with your street cred because I know it's 10 in the morning. But we are excited to have you here today. Um, Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I've been a business analysis practitioner for 20 plus years. I am a BA manager of a small team of 5 at the moment. Um, I enjoy it. I love solving the problems. I love being able to dig into things. I also like helping our business teams understand that there's more than just the work that they do. Think about what you do.
Yeah.
I solve problems by helping them realize they can start thinking about things differently too.
Yeah, exactly. I think, by the way, I think that's a great example of showing leadership as a business analysis professional, right? You can do it, but you're bringing other folks along. Um, Observation, we've been chatting before we got started today about observation. Is it a technique? Babak says it is. Is it a competency? We think it might be.
Yeah.
Um, Tell us what is observation. Let's just for the folks at home wondering what that is, tell us a little bit about what is observation and what you think observation is.
Observation simply is bringing in information. It utilizes all 5 of your senses and really context dependent, and it's one of the core things that we utilize in our role, and it's really important in order to understand where are we and are you getting the right information. And you know it, it's tricky to try to define in terms of the business analysis role, because everything we do relies on a certain amount of observation. And if you've reflected well and have really good recall, you're going to have accurate information from those observations.
Yeah, I feel like observation is deceptively simple because observation implies that we see things, and we do that all the time. But really, when I hear you describe observation, you're talking about other things that happen as a result of that observation. So you talked about reflection, for example. Observation isn't just seeing, but it's also reflecting on what you've seen. Tell us about that a little bit.
So we've all heard of the agile mindset, that you need to be flexible, adaptable. Basically, all of those are in response to something else. And in order to have that adaptability or reflection, you need to understand that what you brought in for information through your observation is accurate. And that reflection lets you think about what you observed. A lot of it is communication. Communication is really one of the foundational aspects of what we do. But that communication also relies on your observation. Active listening is a great example. Listening is your observation. And if you aren't doing a good job with your listening, the reflection of active listening just isn't going to be there.
When I think about reflection, I think you just mentioned this. I think that's a component of agility. And I don't think I've ever thought about observation as a way to help us to be agile, to have an agile mindset. Um, so I think agility is actually one of the other things that you can get as a result of that. So it's seeing and reflecting. I think it also is a little bit of seeing and interpreting, is what observation really is. Again, I can
Yep.
see someone do something, but then I need to take a moment to think about, well, what is that thing that they did? Earlier, we were talking about another component of observation. You talked about empathy being part of that, and so just for the folks that are listening in today, they might have thought, wait, he's talking about observation and active listening. Hang on, those are two different body parts that are involved. Um, but I think what you were talking about is observing, but then really feeling, doing things that might be more what they call empathetic
Yeah.
listening. Yeah, yeah,
So the example I used earlier was if you are a brick wall emotionally and observationally, any of the feedback that you're getting or the attempted communication, which is nonverbal and verbal, both of those you have to take in through your senses. If you're a brick wall of observation, nothing is going to get through, so you're not going to really understand what you're hearing, so or seeing. And being in a meeting where somebody is shaking because they're so frustrated they can't communicate, if you're not picking up on that, you're not being able to have empathy. So there's empathy really relies on the observation in order to really have quality communication.
yeah. When we think about good communication, I think often we think in terms of written or verbal, but that nonverbal stuff is also really important. And
Yeah.
so if I'm in a meeting and we're talking about something and I see somebody being frustrated, there's I see them, I need to interpret, why might they be getting angry or feeling upset about that? That's observation where I'm now starting to interpret. So it really is, observation is a key element of just good communication. So, one second, just want to remind folks, we are live today and we're talking about the power of observation. And so, we're curious, what are your questions? We're going to answer them live. So, if you've got questions about observation, if you've got a question about anything related to any of these topics, kind of these side topics that we've talked about, drop that into the chat. We want to take your questions. So let's see. So we've talked about agility and empathy, those are all components of that. You also mentioned that there's a mindfulness element that we have in observation.
The fun part about observation is if you have so many things going on in your head that you can't be present and pick up on some of those things, you're missing out on loads of information through your observation or inability to observe. So being mindful, being present, and understanding what the environment is, to some extent, situational awareness allows you to be present, to pick up on subtle things. It allows you to pick up on the more obvious things. But if you aren't paying attention, if you aren't being present in the moment, you're missing out on all of that. And that could impact the communication. It could impact the relationship. And a lot of what we do as business analysis professionals is really the relationship and communications. Because if there are blockers there, you're not going to get the right information, or you're not going to hear the ideas that are coming across that are maybe disagreeing with what's presented, or maybe it is agreeing, but you aren't picking up on it. So it's just kind of missed out opportunity.
Yeah. There and you you mentioned one of my favorite phrases, which is relationship, and relationship building. I very often say business analysis is a relationship business, and I feel like this conversation really underscores that. Um, because again, observing can be seeing things, but we're in the human business. And we need to understand that sometimes those things that we are observing are human behaviors, human feelings. I even think about some of the other techniques. You mentioned that that you did some study of the product ownership analysis. guide.
Yep.
And in there, I know that there are examples of techniques that we use, which are in ways built to capture some outputs of observation, like an empathy map. um, would be a great example of that, right? So
Yep.
I can create a process flow that says the steps that people might go through. But an empathy map, am I using the right term? I think it's an empathy map.
Yep.
An empathy map will be where I ask for or observe certain behaviors, certain feelings, and I map those out. Because we may think we're just in the software business or the whatever business, but again, humans use the outputs of most of what we do. The way they feel about it is an important thing to observe and to account for in the work that we do. um, as we've been talking about this today, even before we got started, we both pulled out our Babok guide. So here we go, geek moment, yay! My Babok guide is usually always within reaching range,
Yep.
and we went to the Babok guide, which is, for those that may not be familiar with that term, the business analysis body of knowledge. It's the guide to it, aka the Big Orange Book.
Yep.
We were looking at the technique of observation, and you and I noted kind of the same thing there, which is in the Babok guide. It's one of the techniques. It really is wrapped around that concept of job shadowing,
Right.
um, and that's a thing. But I think what we're saying today is that observation is more than just job shadowing. Um, Maybe it's an underlying competency. Maybe it's something else, because it is something that we do on a regular basis.
Yeah. It's assumed that
Mhm.
we are all skilled at observation. What we do is all about communication. It's really not about the software development. It's about communicating and the relationships. And if your observation skills are essentially non-existent, then the only thing you can really do in our role is focus on the analysis part. And that's assuming all the data that you have is accurate. So observation in itself is one of those inputs to actually capturing data.
Yep,
So there's a translation necessary from what we interpret through our observation to the documentation of that. And yeah, it's susceptible to faulty recall, but that's why we have that additional validation step to present to our stakeholders and say, this is what I captured. Is this accurate?
that's
And
right.
again, it's the trust but verify, but also communication is necessary. So if you're not picking up on what they're saying as far as, oh, not quite right there, depending on their facial expression, you may or may not realize what they're really saying is you completely blew it.
Yeah, so I think we've made a pretty clear case for observing is more than just seeing. And it's more than just sitting with someone and watching what they're doing, which is effectively what
The
what
technique.
yeah, which to me is the technique. Job shadowing is the technique. There are you brought up, I think that there are many senses that are involved. I mean, we've talked about, just in the context of this, there's seeing, there's listening, there's feeling, there's a bunch of other things. That is why simple recall of something that we've observed is not not just the only thing we should do. It is a part of it,
Yep.
but just seeing something and writing it down is really not effective. So we've talked about, before we got on today, that really you want to observe and include other techniques along with it, because you're right. You've got to be able to validate what you've seen or what you've heard, and so there are ways that you can do that. You mentioned, data analysis, right? I can do simple observation of data, and I can use that analysis to determine some outcomes. And I don't know if you are following at all any of the goings on of Starbucks. By the way, I always look to business stories to find where did business analysis triumph and where did we not use business analysis. And right now, what's going on with Starbucks is a good example of where we have not used good business analysis, specifically observation. So here's the quick story. They have just swapped out their CEO, who's only been there for a year. And it came on the heels of kind of a disastrous quarter results where they've lost money. And I don't know if you've been to Starbucks recently, but they have really prioritized mobile orders and drive-throughs. In fact, that's how they get the majority of their orders. It's like 70% now. But think about what Starbucks was when it first arrived. It was the place that you went and you hung out and you had coffee and you met friends. And the guy that founded it and was the CEO for ages, like that was his focus. And I noticed when they brought in a new CEO just this week, um, that they made a little dig, which was we shouldn't be doing things just based on the data. We actually need to understand what's going on in the cafes themselves.
Yep.
And so, really, what he was saying is we need to not just be in our offices, like, we need to be in these cafes, understanding the customer experience, seeing what's happening. The data might tell us one thing in one direction, but that isn't the only thing. So, I think that's a good example of where you really need to combine observation with other kinds of analytical techniques.
Yeah.
So,
User experience is all about observation.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think good product owners really understand that, and especially those that are in the user experience space, they understand that there's more to what you're building than just what on paper looks like it should work. Let's see. All right. Well, let me take a look here at. We have some questions. You want to take a couple of questions?
Absolutely.
All
I'll
right.
do my best.
Well, we can just go anywhere with these questions. That's the fun thing. Okie doke. So, our first question today is from Mary. How would observation apply in facilitation, especially in groups? Whoo, this is a good one.
That's a fun one.
Exactly.
It,
What do
it
you think?
starts with understanding the dynamics in the room. If you have management and if you're not picking up on the fact that people are being tight-lipped, quiet, just they make a face based on what somebody says, ideally the facilitator is going to try to draw some of that out or realize people aren't engaging because there's management in the room. Maybe it involves stopping, taking them aside and say, if you want this to be productive, get out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that so this is a great point, and I think it just underscores what you said just a moment ago about seeing, and then we need to validate what we have seen. And so I have also been in the room for tough facilitation scenarios where I could tell the physical body language was uncomfortable.
Yep.
Um, I also recognize that I might see things and I might give my own spin to them based on whatever I think is going on in the room. But it's really important in that moment to ask, and also, by the way, being appropriate about it. So it's not comfortable if I see someone who doesn't seem to be wanting to engage. It's not comfortable to go, Susan, what's your problem, right?
Right.
So there's some bit of appropriateness that needs to
Yep.
be applied, because it could be something sensitive. It could have nothing to do with what's going on in that meeting. It could be that that person simply had a bad morning, doesn't know what this meeting is about, et cetera, et cetera. But that observation can give you the first indication that you need
Yep.
to go further
Agreed.
in that inquiry. Yeah.
Trust but verify. You need
Trust
to
but verify.
understand,
Yeah.
is what I'm picking up what's really going on? And it's not always easy to do when you're the facilitator. If you've got somebody else in the room that is available as a scribe or timekeeper, some other role, It helps to, in order to get somebody else engaged while you take a comment off to the side. It's not easy, but you need to understand through your observation, is this going well? And that it's easier, definitely easier in the room. If this is virtual, you need to have cameras on. You need to have the microphones on because it's next to impossible to have a truly useful and productive facilitation meeting when you see nothing at all, when cameras are off and
Mm,
all you have is silence, whether you're facilitating or if you're a presenter. So the fun thing about presenting, you get to feed off the energy of the room and you're
yeah.
observing the energy in the room to be able to feel it. You can see looking around that people are engaged. If you're doing it virtually and all you see is yourself or your slides, the energy that you have in presenting is not going to be the same as if you have visual cues, auditory cues, people nodding and
They get
smiling.
thumbs up, right? I heard a funny take on an old turn of phrase recently, and there's that phrase, "read the room."
Yep.
I've heard it, "read the Zoom," which I thought was pretty hysterical. But when we do webinars at IIBA, one of the things I do in the housekeeping moment is say, "Hey guys, we've got the reactions turned on. Make sure that you use them because the speaker can see those." And that can help them understand if you're connecting with the content, if you think something they've said is funny. And the speakers actually get, to your point, they get energized because they know, oh, they're listening to me. Because in our webinars, they can't actually see faces. But that's a way that we can see,
Yep.
right? And that's really important because facilitation isn't just like reading off an agenda, checking off the items and moving on. Facilitation is an extremely it can be very complicated because you are dealing with a lot of different factors all at once. And so that's a great point about having somebody else in that room who can provide you with a little bit of intelligence about what's going on, who maybe can help to point out things that you're not seeing because it is. Boy, facilitation is sensory overload. You got a lot going on that's coming at you. So it's yeah, it can be a lot of info.
It's overload if you're observant.
Yeah, yeah,
If
yeah,
you're a brick wall, it's just it's there, but you're focused on your agenda and just moving to the next point. Being a quality facilitator, you have the observation. You're picking up on visual cues that help you understand, do we need to continue or do we need to skip, or maybe this is a parking lot issue because there's other things that need to be worked out before we can really make something useful of this topic.
yeah, yeah. And we kind of you and I were talking about at the top of this. What's the power in this? Whoo, this is very powerful. This is in some ways, right? It's kind of like a key to the humanity that we bring to the work that we do is simply by being able to see what's happening around us and interpret it. So I really do think it is a power.
Yeah,
Well, all right.
it's an enabler to all the other skills that we really need
Yeah.
in order to be productive, to be truly useful in our role.
Yep. I like that. Yep, it is definitely an enabler of a lot of the things that we do. All right, well, Judy has our next question. What is a technique or tool you can utilize to help ensure you observe accurately, even when you get overwhelmed with information?
I
Yeah,
go back to trust but verify. So, depending on the context of what we're doing, is it presentation of data analysis? Okay. Then different visualization tools, mock-ups, wireframes, different things that help bring context to either the existing problem or where the solution is needing to go. And there's opportunity in really understanding what is our goal. If you need observation to truly understand the goal also helps understand the problem. Yes, you can read all kinds of documentation. Document analysis is definitely a skill. It doesn't pick up on nuance. You're not going
Mm-hmm.
to get any nuance, and nuance is really the visual observation of people.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'll add to that is that people learn and take in information in different ways. And so there are visual learners, people that really do want to see something. As a facilitator, as an analyst who is presenting information back for validation or verification, one of the things that you can factor into your business analysis planning is the use of models, the use of something that somebody can see and give you feedback on. Again, that would be their
Absolutely.
observation in giving feedback. I'll tell you a funny story from my past. We had some very complicated rules. I worked at an insurance company. We had some very complicated rules for how we applied water deductibles on the East Coast of the United States. So, the East Coast of the United States is very known for nor'easters, so big storms, snowfall, this time of year, hurricanes. So there's a
Hurricanes.
lot of water issues that happen on the East Coast. And there's a lot of factors that go into the rules deciding if a deductible is applied and what deductible. So we created a decision tree. That seemed like the right way to present this information. But when we looked at it, it would be we couldn't put it on a 8.5 by 11 page. So we printed it off on a plotter, and the tallest guy in the office, who was 6'7", came and pasted it on the wall. And we had the group come in and say, "All right, here's markers. Tell us what this is." And they could spend as much time as they wanted in the room. We gave them a step stool, and they could just mark things up. If we had gone, if we had told them what the rules were, if we had used some other methods, I don't think it would have been as impactful.
Yep.
But we realized that we needed them to see it in order to validate it. So,
And they were picking up more by getting up and writing.
yes, yes, that action of somebody getting up on the step stool and writing, and of course, you'd have a couple of people chime in, "No, wait, I don't think you've got that right." And it spurred conversation, which was a great result of that. So, Judy, I hope we have answered your questions. Okay, let's see. So we are still taking questions. We're still live today, and we're talking about observation. So we want to know what you want to know about observation. All right. So Judy also has our next question. Um, let's see. Oh, this is sort of a little bit of a different spin. So, a technique or tool to ensure you observe accurately when you get overwhelmed. I think this is kind of, oh, so maybe she clarified on this with
Oh,
stakeholders. Let's talk about um, that word accurately in here. So, we've talked about that our observations can be incomplete or wrong. What are some of the ways that we can ensure accuracy?
I, kind of going back to the trust but verify. You have your own assumptions based on what you captured. You start thinking about it and realize, yeah, this is right. I'm all good. So you have your own determination of, I think this is right, and ready to have them look at. And then the response, it could be, yeah, depending on the words they use, depending on, are you in person or over Zoom, there's all kinds of opportunities for them to be nice, be gentle, but
Yeah.
are the words consistent with the tone of voice, with the look on their face? Being able to pick up on all that, you, that's going to help you understand whether you're accurate. And they need to be congruous. They need to have the same message. The look on the face, tone of voice, the words they're using, their energy, the intensity of that conversation. It needs to be consistent in order to understand, is what you are presenting to them and they're saying yes.
Yeah, you make a good point there because it is about, I mean, really, accuracy is in the eyes of the person that has provided that information to you in whatever fashion. So, we talked about, um, who's right, me or you or my lion eyes, right? That I saw something that I think I saw, but ultimately you might be the person who can let me know if it's accurate. You have to ask. You can you and that's, I think, a good part of what we do, as business analysis professionals is we don't just assume that what we are capturing is accurate, but we need to ask if it is accurate. And
Mhm.
I think if you want good feedback, I think you ensure that you provide that information in a way that people can engage with it, that people can do their own mental processes to ask themselves, did I provide the correct information? Because hey, sometimes you see something and the person
Yep.
that is being observed is like, no, that's not the case, right? And it's a good place for a conversation of, no, actually, I did notice that this happened. And I just want to check in with you to see if what I think I saw is what was really happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's some courage there. There's some transparency and some honesty about, that you have to employ in order to check your results. So
Check yourself.
that's right. You got to check yourself. All righty. So let's see. All right. We've got another question here. All right. This is from Ashish. Thanks, Ashish. What are top 5 questions on the first day of discovery for a new initiative with business stakeholders? Top 5 questions.
It,
Hmm.
there's too much context involved. Because I look at this and it makes me think you're coming into this blind. So, what are your top 5 questions?
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
I if I'm preparing for facilitation or discovery, I'm trying to pull as much context and information as possible so that I can come into this and one, validate my understanding through a couple simple questions about this is what I see. Is this accurate? And really try to make sure I understand what's current. And if I don't have enough information about what's current, then those are my questions about discovery.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where are we today? What's the problem that you think you're experiencing? And that's kind of a loaded question because what they experience isn't necessarily the problem. It's a symptom, which is why we have root cause analysis as a technique in a model. There's options. You've got the Ishikari fishbone diagram to help us visualize what are the different things that are being experienced. And really, it's understanding what's the problem, what's the issue that we're trying to resolve, and whatever's been identified, is that accurate? So they might not know. They understand what their symptoms are, and that's typically what's being described and defined. That's where our role comes in, and we dig in to understand what's really at issue here.
Yeah, when I think about how something like observation might be used to get to those questions, because you're right, there's not a static set of questions that I might think of that I might start with. I might do some pre-work and I might use a little bit of observation in order to produce a couple of models, to
Yep.
take into that, because ultimately the question that I think we're going to want to solve is what what is the problem. Are we clear on that? And there can
Yeah.
be some steps that we can take early before that discovery in order to see if the group even understands what the problem is, because if they don't, that might be where you start your discovery.
Yep.
And I think some information with a couple of really good pictures of what information you've been able to collect is a good way to lead that conversation. So I like you brought the fishbone diagram, and some other things that can just help them to think through the why is this a problem? What is it that we're experiencing that we think is a problem? So, Ashish, I don't know that we gave you the top 5 questions,
Nope.
but hopefully we gave you a little bit of maybe some prep work that you can do before that discovery session. All righty. So let's see, and I can see in the comments that folks are giving some suggestions, Ashish. So if you are in YouTube, which you are, over on LinkedIn, they're actually giving you some ideas for some questions you could ask. So you might pop over to our chat there. Um, so let's see. Uh, we're still going to take a couple of more questions. So if anyone has some questions, we are happy to take it. Steve, I'm going to change the topic on you.
Fire
You
away.
are part of a chapter, right? You're part
Yes.
of the Hartford chapter. Yeah, tell us a little bit about what's going on with the Hartford chapter. How can people connect with you?
So main connection is through LinkedIn. I am the current VP of Education for the Hartford chapter, and one of the things that we've been doing is really collaborating with other chapters across the country. And maybe at some point soon we'll be having a international collaboration.
Hmm.
So we've got some of those in the works. Thankful for some of the conferences I've been able to attend because those have enabled connections with speakers and business analysis professionals across the world. Um, so we've got a couple things in the works. So I'm actually looking forward to some of those coming up.
Well, that's really exciting. And because I know that I have come and been a speaker at one of the events that you guys hosted. The work that we do, we've talked about it a lot today, and I used the phrase business analysis is a relationship business. And so I think one of the great things about being part of the chapters is that it's kind of a built-in network of people.
Yep.
So if you are interested in asking questions or finding out some other experiences, really there's almost no better network to connect into than a chapter. So I know that we've got all of the chapter events. There's about 120 chapters all
There's a
over the
lot.
world with new ones starting up all the time. So if you are interested in participating in a chapter event, there's our chapter events calendar, which is out on the IIBA website. Um, Chapters are technically for members, but I know that you guys often have events for non-members so they can learn about what you do, what IIBA does. What's the next thing you guys have coming up? I'm going to give you a second to brag about the Hartford chapter.
We have an event coming up with Jamie Champagne
Ooh,
talking about
very
generative
cool.
AI use. Jamie
Yeah.
is a dynamic, energetic, fantastic speaker. She's amazing.
She really is amazing. And if some of you out there know that name, I know she's got some LinkedIn learnings. So you might have seen her there, but she also speaks at conferences and things like that. Well, that is very cool. Um, One other thing that I want to mention, I talked about a membership in IIBA. Steve, I don't know if you recently renewed your membership? You
I
did.
renewed back in May, so I missed out on the discount that
Well,
just got
now here's
announced.
the deal. Here's the deal though. You actually can use that renewal discount and you can just pre-renew for your next year. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yes.
Excellent.
So you can go out to the IIBA website. You can find there's no discount code or anything. You just basically renew again and we'll just tack on that next year. So consider that for a moment. We've got that going on. I think that goes on through the end of the month. I think Rosalind will drop a link maybe into
Sweet.
into the chats. Um, all right. Well, Steve, I think let's kind of wrap up. I don't see any more questions, but we want to thank everybody for questions today. Final thoughts on observation.
Observation is about taking in information, but utilizing the communication to make sure that what you are presenting as your documented observations is accurate. Because to some extent, those observations become data.
Yeah.
Data is really useful, but it's a lot of garbage in, garbage out. So you need to make sure that what you're observing and what you're capturing of those observations is accurate. So
Yeah.
make sure.
Great point. Observation is just a data point, but it's not
Not
the
the only
only
one.
piece of data. Great reminder. All right. Well, Steve, thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan.
We will see you again. Maybe we'll see you on Analysts After Dark, also on a LinkedIn Live podcast.
Yep.
So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Um, well, so that's it for today, but we will be back in 2 weeks and we're going to be talking about driving behaviors for business success. I got a boatload of guests who are going to come and talk about that. It is going to be a fascinating topic, and we hope to see you there. So we'll see you 2 weeks from today. Thanks. Bye bye.